In this video, I show you how to make this gorgeous silver birch woodland party cake. Believe it or not, everything on this cake started off as white. So watch to find out how I coloured it in this gorgeous watercolour effect, which was inspired by a children's birthday card. We start off by showing you how to get this peeling silver birch bark effect using a specific sugar paste, then how to get the effect of the knots and all the gnarliness. We then move on to modelling these gorgeous little animals, the fox, the rabbit, the little hedgehog and the mouse poking out, followed by a little bit of bunting and some ivy leaves. I'm Claire St. Quinton, so let's get going. I'm going to start by covering my cake. I've got my sugar paste here. Now, for this particular cake, I'm using the Squires Kitchen covering paste. There's a reason why I've chosen that particular paste. It stays softer for longer, and I'm going to explain to you as I go through the video why that's important. So I'm going to start by giving it a bit of a knead and being nice and soft. It doesn't take a lot of kneading, and it's quite friendly on your hands as well. When you're rolling, a tip for you is just to roll along and then turn it so it doesn't stick to the bottom, and so as you're rolling you get an even shape. Right, I think that's enough. We don't want it too thin. You want it about 5 millimeters and no thinner, because we are going to be doing a little bit of cutting into it and we don't want to expose the sponge. Okay, now when I'm covering my cakes, my tip is never to drag the sugar paste to the cake. Bring the cake to the sugar paste because you don't want to risk any tearing of the paste. So what I do is I simply take my rolling pin and I flip my paste over like so. Then, as I said, bring my cake to me. And then what you do, you want minimal air being trapped here. So as you cover it, don't sort of flop it on because then you risk trapping air into it. So start on one side like that. Make sure it goes right down to the bottom and then slowly just flip it over. Again, making sure there's no air trapped in there. Flip it over like so. Okay, so now that's on, let's start with the smoothing. Now, your hands are really, really good tools. And I like to use my hands when I'm covering a cake. So let's start with our hands and we start on the top. As you smooth it over, you can check for air bubbles. Now at this point, if you've got any air bubbles at the top, because we haven't smoothed it on the sides yet, you've got gaps to bring it out. I actually haven't got any air bubbles, but if you did, all you would do is just bring them out and then just let them escape underneath like so. So we start off with our hands, just going over the cake. Then what we do, using our hands again, is we start to secure it around the top edge like that. Now as you can see, this particular paste is lovely for this because it doesn't have that cracking or the elephant skin. It's so soft. So we're just going to smooth it all the way around, and by securing it on the top edge first, you don't risk that tearing. So now that's nice and secure, we move further down, again using your hands. So this is a really good tip for you. When you're securing it onto the sides of the cakes, what you do is you press it down. If you pull it down, that's when you can sort of get this crack here. So never ever pull the paste down. It's very simple. Press it across. Don't drag down. And as you do that, so you don't get these kind of fabric kind of looking bits of sugar paste, you just pull them out and press down. And repeat all the way around. And as I said, at this point, we're just using hands. Okay, now that we've done that, I want to get rid of some of the excess sugar paste on my board. So I'm just going to take a knife. Don't go too close to the edge at this point. We just want to get rid of that excess. So just have about an inch either side. Then we can clear that away. Okay, now I'm going to bring in my smoother. Now I like this smoother, and the reason I like this one is because it's got a straight edge as well as a beveled edge, which is important. So we start from the top at this point, so we like to smooth over, the same as what you were doing earlier, but this time with a nice smoother to get a really flat top. and then bring it along the sides, just smoothing all the way around, getting rid of any lumps and bumps. And then what we do, now this is a really good tip. When you're putting your cake directly onto a board like this, you want to be able to seal the cake onto the board without any air going into it. What that does is that allows your cake to stay fresher for longer, and it gives you that really nice neat edge at the bottom. On this particular cake, we're not putting any piping around, we're not putting any ribbon around, so we need that nice neat edge at the bottom. So what you do is you take your smoother and you take that flat edge and you really press it down so your icing is really flush to the board, like so, all the way around the cake. And we cut that off. So this time, take your knife much closer to the cake and trim off that excess. Now, if necessary, we can go again with this. So if you look really close to the edge here, so you take your smoother again, and then you just really, just that final bit of sugar paste on the bottom there, press it really down onto the board. Can you see it's all just coming out onto the board, but it's creating that seal so there's no gap. There we go. And that way, then you can take your knife and you can cut around that really neatly. Remove that there, that excess, and look at that. You've got that lovely flush knee edge on the side here. So I'm just going to repeat that all the way around the cake. Right, there we go. So that's all done and looks nice and neat. Right, now onto the sharp edges. What's really good about this particular paste is it's easy to manipulate. So these sharp edges are going to be a dream to do. To do sharp edges, what I've got here is the Bellissimo Flexi Smoothers. So here's how I particularly like to use them. So you've got one with a straight edge and one with a curved edge. Now what I do is I take the one with the straight edge and I hold it against the side of the cake, and I have it so it's just flush to the top of the cake. Then I take my other one, and what I do is, starting from the center of the cake, I manipulate and tease the icing towards the other one, and that eventually, can you see, it starts to close that gap as you bring it across and over the other one. Can you see that starting to close that gap? So I'm going to do a little bit more just here with the same method. Just manipulate it from the center. And that was another reason why we didn't want to roll our sugar paste too thin, because we want to be able to have this sugar paste here to be able to manipulate it into the side. Then, once you've got a bit of a closed gap, you then take the curved part and you put that against the edge of the cake, and then you can go around that way. So that way you get a nice straight side. There we go. Now, I really took my time with that, because you can do with this paste because you've got the time. And I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. So that is the cake covered, sharp edges done. Now it's time to move on to the next bit, which is where we turn this into a lovely woodland tree trunk. The first bit we're going to do is some of the bark. And this is where you will see why having a sharp edge was really important for this cake. Now what we do is we take a knife. The knife needs to be really sharp. Now I'm using a scalpel, which I would recommend, but obviously just if you do use a scalpel, please do be careful. And what we do is we want it to be really thin, this nice peeling silver birch bark. So we're going to take our blade of our scalpel and we're going to place it vertically into the very edge of the cake. So you don't want to be too far in, you want to be as far to the edge as possible. And then I've actually got my cake on a turntable because for me, this makes it easier, but it's up to you how you want to do it. What we do is we want to bring that blade all the way around the cake. And the reason you want it right on the edge is two reasons. One is because you want that really, really thin peeling bark, but also if you bring it too close in, you'll end up cutting too much sugar paste off and you'll end up exposing the sponge cake underneath, which obviously we don't want. And then just turn the turntable and just go all the way till you reach the other side. So what we do now we've done that is we want to start to just tease it away, and you can tear it. Actually, I'm just going to blend that back in because sometimes it comes off completely, which is absolutely fine, by the way, if it comes off completely, because that's the nature of silver birch. But you just want to pull it away gently, just teasing it. Okay, so that's the start. Then what I want to do is, just to make it a little bit more realistic, I just use my hands and do a little bit of sort of like pinching and smoothing on the edge, just to get that really thin peeling bark effect. And what that does, if you can see now, you've got that inner trunk and this completely separate bark, and it starts to make it look really realistic. And then we just want a few more tears. So if you haven't got any natural tears, you can either use your knife to create a little tear, like so, or you can actually just tear it with your hands, like that. And don't worry about over tearing. Remember, it's a tree trunk, it's a natural thing. Lovely. Okay, so now we've done that, we want to create some splits on the top. So this is a really good way of doing it. You just take the end of a paintbrush, like a nice thin paintbrush, and you press it in like so, and then just gently wiggle it more this way than that way. And by gently wiggling it that way, look, you're getting a nice little crack. Just manipulate it like that. You're getting a nice crack in the top of the log without actually cutting away at the paste. And then when we do that, we then want to tear away a bit more here where it's just cracked open, like so. And I'm just going to do another one of them because I think it looks nice if you've got more than one. Lovely. Okay, so that's our initial bark done. I'm now going to move on to the sides and showing you some more of the tree trunk details. I brought this cake in so I can demonstrate what I'm going to show you next, which is the really gnarly knot, the heart, and also the root. And I'm going to show you how to do that on a board. And the reason for this is I think you'll be able to see it better, but also it's a really good tip that if you are new to something, try it first either on your worktop or on a board before transferring it onto the cake. Now I've got the sugar paste here, and this is where this sugar paste really comes into its own because it's so soft. You can really blend it, and we need to do quite a lot of blending with this cake. So I've taken a bit and I'm going to roll it into a ball. Size of the ball depends on what size knot you want, but that's kind of just smaller than a ping pong ball. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then what you do, imagine obviously this is the side of your cake, is you place it on and you just want to press it down slightly so it's got a slightly flat top and it's kind of secure then onto the side. Then if you've got one, use a ball tool. If you haven't, it's fine. You can use the end of a paintbrush. What we do is we want to create that hole. So you just press in, and then what I do is I actually use my finger just to secure it. You don't want a perfect hole here. You want it to be uneven. So you can sort of bring it in like that, or you can actually pull it out that way. It doesn't want to be uniform. There we go. And then once we've done that, I've got another tool here. Now this is a Dresden tool, which I love and I use it all the time on most of my cakes. So if you like a tool, I recommend the Dresden tool. But again, if you haven't got one, it's fine. You can use a paintbrush. So what we do now is we want to actually blend this onto the sides of the cake, because we want this to look like it's part of the tree trunk and not stuck on. So this is why blending is so important, like so. And then what we do, we can leave it as it is because it looks fine. All knots are different. Or if you want to, you can bring it in a little bit. So we've got a little bit of a hollow in there. Or you can pull it out a bit. It's entirely up to you. Or you can even put some little ridges on it if you like, just to make it more gnarly. But that is essentially all you do for the knot. Okay. Now I'm just going to move that because I want to show you the next piece. So I'm just going to pop that up there. Like so. So now we're going to move on to doing a root. So with this one, again, size depends on how big you want your root. I don't want my root too small because I actually want to hide a little woodland animal next to it. So I've got similar sort of size here. What we do then, once we've rolled it into a ball, is we roll it into a cone. Like so. And then we just want to flatten that bit there. And you have to imagine that that flat bit there is going to go on the base of your board, like that. So we, again, place that on the side of your cake, that at the bottom. Press it down so it secures onto the cake. And then again, using your Dresden tool, you just want to blend it in. Now I will demonstrate, just in case you don't have these tools. If you've got a paintbrush, look, you can get the same effect. So you just roll it down like that and blend it in. And then if you want at this point to make it more like a root, you can put some little lines going down it. Like that. There you are. And that's really simple, but that is literally how you do a root. Now, I'm going to move that one out of the way for the final bit. Let's pop that up there. Now, the final bit is the heart. When someone puts a heart on a tree, the way they've done it is they've carved it with a knife. And essentially, that is scarring on the tree. And scarring is often like a raised bump, which is what we're going to create now. So what we do is we get some more of our sugar paste. And we want to roll it into a really long, thin sausage. Okay, there we go. It doesn't have to be even at all. And in terms of length, it depends how big you want your heart. So then what I do, just to create that heart shape, is I just kind of pinch the middle of it, like so. And then bring it round, bring the ends together. Okay, there we go. And then once you've got your shape, then we do some more blending. Now I think it's a lot easier if you start on the outer edge rather than the inner. So again, you want to blend this down, and you want to blend down just enough that you've still got like a ridge here, but you're taking away that look of a stuck-on sausage of sugar paste onto the side of your cake. There we go. And then once you've done that, we then want to go into the inner edge. So you're just repeating, and you want to have this kind of nice ridge going along the top here. So just go all the way around again, but this time on the inner edge. Lovely. Okay, so once you're happy with that, then what we do is we take a knife. I'm going to use my scalpel again, but you can use any sharp knife. And you want to cut a line all the way along the very top of the ridge. And this is essentially creating that kind of open scar, if you like, of where the tree, that the heart has been carved into the tree. Okay, and then I take my end of my Dresden tool, and what I do is I just slightly open that up. It doesn't have to be even. In fact, it's better if it's not. This really comes into its own when you start to colour this. Okay, there we go. Lovely. Right, so now that I have done these, I'm actually going to do them again, but this time on the side of my cake. So here we go, starting with the knot. Right, once you've done that, the cake is then ready to be coloured, and when you colour it, that really just brings it to life. In my paint palette here, I've got some Dust Food Colours by Squires Kitchen. I've got some white, and most of it is white because we're going to need quite a bit of that. Then I've got a little bit of orange, black, dark brown and dark green. And we're going to create like a wash. So we're mixing it with water, and you need a decent sized brush. And what we do is in this middle bit here where we've got the majority of the white, I'm just going to pour a little bit of water in there, like so. Mix that up. You want it quite diluted. You are just creating a wash at this point. And then what we want to do with that is just add a tiny bit at a time of brown. And then just to warm it up slightly, tiny bit of orange. Okay, so once you've got a really pale colour that's really quite watery, what we're going to do is paint the side of the cake. Now, I would suggest you start at the back first, just in case you're not overly happy with the colour. So just start to paint. Can you see it's just a really, really liquidy wash? And that's all we want at this stage. So just start to paint it on the cake. And you want to go over everything on the side. Okay. So I've gone all the way around now, and it's just created that lovely little bit of a pale colour, and it's a base colour. Now we've done that, we want to work on the top, and I want to darken it slightly, which is why I started with the side first. So I'm going to put a little bit more of the orange in there, just for a little bit of warmth. And a little bit of the dark brown. Just want it ever so slightly darker. And then what we do, this is really great, I love this effect. So you want quite a wide flat brush for this. And we start off in the very centre, and I've got my cake on a turntable, and it's because I want to be able to spin it like this. So place your brush in the middle, turn your turntable, and basically start brushing round. Now at this point it's quite watery and it's quite pale, but you have to trust the process. So keep bringing it round until you've got it covered all the way. And as you can see, the reason I'm doing it like this rather than just brushing it all over is I'm creating this ring effect like you get on a normal tree trunk. You have these lovely rings. So once you've gone over once, then this is one of the reasons why I'm using dust, is buildable colour and that really sort of illustration watercolour look. I then go again with a little bit of the dust. And I go over it again, and this time start to build that colour. So when it's on my brush, I can build it, and you get more and more rings as you go around, bringing your brush round. Now, you can build as much colour as you like. It really depends on the colours that you want on your cake. And now I'm going back in and out until you've got all the rings that you want. Lovely. Okay. And then finally, you just want to go around the edging, but on the inside of the bark. Just make sure you've got all that inside bit. In fact, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use a smaller brush just to get nicely in there. There we go. I really love that because it just really looks like a beautiful watercolour illustration. So now the washing is done, we're going to move on now to more of the finer details along the bark. Now let's start with the top of the cake. I want to colour these splits in the log. So I'm going to take some of the dark brown, just as it is dry, because I've got enough liquid in the little wells of this. And I'm just going to brush it straight in, just to build up a bit of colour. Lovely. And then the same again on the other one. Just going to turn it so I can see it. Fabulous. Really love that watercolour effect. Right, now that's done, back onto the sides. So at this point, we're just going to work with the colours we've got in our palette. And I'm going to use my bigger brush. And I want to create a slightly darker colour, like a brownish colour. But I want to then dry my brush off a little bit. So I get my colour I'm happy with, but then dab it onto the kitchen roll. Because you want to do just slightly, a little bit of brushing on there to get the lines. I would suggest start at the back first, just to make sure you're okay with that. So yeah, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to go back to the front so you can see. And it's just very subtle brush strokes. And it just creates the typical lines that you get with a birch tree. And again, this is what's great about using dust, is you can really build colour up. So you just want to go all the way around, just creating those lovely signature birch lines. Okay, so now I want to work on the heart and the knot actually. I'm going to go with a smaller brush at this point. It's nice to have a range of brushes. And I just want to do a little bit of shading. Just gives a little bit of realism if you do little bits of shading around the raised bits, the scarring essentially. So just add some slight bits of shading. And then the same, all these bits that you added, your root, your heart, your knots, be a little bit bold with the shading. Okay, and then same again, I'll just show you the knot. So be quite bold around the edge of it. And then we want a little bit of the black mixed with the brown to go right on the inside, because that's essentially a hole in the tree. And whilst I've got that blacky brown on my brush, I'm going to go inside the heart where I actually cut it before. I'm going to go inside. It really brings that heart out nicely. Okay, so back to the bigger brush. And I want a bit of the black and the brown, so similar, but on a bigger brush. And you want this quite dry. So I'm just going to wipe that off. Where we've pulled out the bark here, you want to sort of go in underneath it and brush outwards to create that shading effect, which really shows off the bark. And you do that with all of them. All the slits that you made, go behind and brush out. Okay, and then we want to just create a little bit on the edge of the bark here as well. You basically don't want any white left over. So just create that shading and the edging. Okay, now what I want to do is a little bit of mottling. So I want to take a little bit of the brown in with the white. So I'm just doing this dry. And I'm going to just randomly do a little bit of mottling. And if you ever go to a real birch and actually look at the bark on a real birch, you'll see it's almost like a little growth, if you like, on the tree. And that added shade, it's another texture which just really brings it to life. Right, now, a couple more things. Just a little bit of, be a bit brave with your bark just to really show that off with some dark bits. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually put a name in the heart. Now I'm turning this so you guys watching can actually see it, but you'll have to forgive me because I can't really see it. But luckily, it has to look quite rough anyway, like it's been carved. So I've got a really thin brush here, and I've just mixed a little bit of water in with a bit of black and a bit of brown. And I'm going to write the name Alex, because I think I can do that without looking. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to do it quite rough, because like I said, it needs to look like it's been carved in anyway. Right, I've got the ear done. That's a start. There we go. It's not too bad for someone who's doing it backwards. Okay, right. So that looks great, but there is another thing I'd like to add to this. And that is, because I want this trunk to look like it's on the ground with grass growing around it, I'm going to add a little bit of dark green. So I'm just going to make it a little bit wet. And what we do is we want to mottle it kind of onto the board. This is where it's really nice again when you're painting. It's not often you actually bring a design onto the board like this with painting. And I just think this really brings it to life. So you do it on the board, but then you also bring it up onto the cake, and it just looks like you've got bits of moss and bits of greenery just coming up and growing up onto the log as though it's been sat there in a woodland for ages and nature's taken hold. I think it looks lovely. Okay, now I think that is all the dusting and painting completed.